The KTOO Legacy Foundation and the Southeast Alaska Estate Planning Council present Life Planning with Rajiv Nagaich. Mr. Nagaich is a Seattle area attorney and host of Aging Options, a weekly radio program that focuses on elder law and elder care needs.
So raise your hands if you think you're actually aging. Why? So your hands don't go up. What do you eat for breakfast, you guys? I want to come to know you a little bit better. But the rest of us, I think this is topic that I talk about. I've been talking about this topic for about 17 years now. It all has to do with the aging process. So let me ask by just going to you and asking you a few things about aging. Look at the rest of your life. Between now and the day that we are going to shuffle the mortal coil, what are the biggest fears you have about the aging process? No, oh, wow, not being able to call Kevorkian. You're getting close in Washington, Oregon, right? And California now. You're getting closer every day. Yeah. Yeah, boy, I've never heard that one before. I don't have a comeback to that. What else?
I'm afraid if I die, my kids will sell my tools too cheap.
That's right. Not only do I worry about my estate today or my assets today, but what happens to them after I'm gone and no longer in control? Right. Anything else? Anything else big comes to your mind? What do you, sir?
Just trying to stay healthy up until the time.
Okay, stay healthy for what purpose?
Well, just so that you can enjoy life as much as possible.
So you can enjoy life. Actually, that is the issue, but it's not how you're phrasing it. When you look at all the research that is done around the issue of aging, go ask any retiree, what is your biggest fear about retirement? The number one fear people will say is this: having to endure institutional care, right? It's the reverse of I want to live a long life to enjoy life. And this is another way of saying I want to stay healthy so I never get to see the inside of a nursing home. The second biggest fear people will say they have about retirement is running out of money. And the third biggest fear people will say they'll have about retirement is becoming a burden to other people. Right? And this is in any national poll that you take a look at, people will say, this is another way of actually saying that if I can live my life without ever having to endure being put into a nursing home against my wishes, running out of money, or becoming a burden to the people I love the most, that is not a bad life to have lived, right? So that's the easy part of the equation. So here's the second part of the equation. How does the average American plan and prepare to get ready for retirement? If you're still working, what are some of the actual steps you're taking so you can actually one day say, okay, I've had enough of this. I can actually retire. What are you doing to get ready for retirement? Saving, that's right. That's the first thing that comes to people's minds, right? That to go into retirement without having access to a meaningful amount of assets is not an easy thing. We are no longer going to be working, and we will need some financial means to be able to retire with. That's usually the first place people will go. And if you look at the actual process of retirement planning, surprisingly, most of us in America follow the same beaten path towards retirement planning. It never feels the same, but almost always is exactly the same process. So what does that process look like? Here's what that looks like. Somewhere between 60 and 62, somewhere around age 62, the average person starts getting that itch. And what is the itch the average person will get at 60 or 62, somewhere there? Is quit working, that's right. You know, when can I go to my boss's office and say, here are your keys, it's been a fun ride, thank you very much, go hire somebody, I'm not coming back. But most of us, despite the fact that we would much rather retire, we will hang in there working till at least age 65, because at that age, there's something miraculous that's going to happen to us. So what is the miracle of age 65? Is Medicare, that's right. Because we intuitively know that going into retirement without having access to meaningful health care is not a good way to retire. So we hang in there working, miserable or not. We hang in there working till 65, we enroll in Medicare, we buy a supplement insurance plan, and if you're keeping track of a checklist the first thing that you're going to check off on that checklist for retirement planning is health planning. Once you have done that, now you'll go back to the office and say, okay, I've had enough. Here are your keys. I'm not coming back home. The second area people will look at in retirement planning is the housing issue. And the average person's housing planning goal is something like this. I want to be able to live my life out in my own home as long as possible. And when the day comes that I can't manage my own affairs on my own, we'll figure something out. Right? So how many of you are in that bucket? Right? That's majority of America. Is that really a plan? It's more like a hope. It's not a plan. But that's what we do with housing. The third area that we'll take a look at is finances. And truth be told, people will mistake financial planning with retirement planning. If you ever Google the term retirement planning, see what kind of hits come up. You'll have billions of hits about financial issues that'll come up. It's about buying insurance and getting a reverse mortgage, how to invest money, how much money are you going to need, how do you decide how much income you're going to need in retirement, etc. There'll be all sorts of calculators and information about finances. And the notion around financial planning is quite simple. It is something like this. If you can just go into retirement with a large enough pot of money and with a decent amount of income, then you should be able to skate through retirement. And somewhere along the lines, many of us will take a look at a long-term care insurance policy as part of that financial planning equation, thinking that, well, if I have that, then my long-term care needs will be taken care of. So that's where the average person will spend majority of the time planning, is in finances. And then we will take a look at legal planning. Oh, Mr. Lawyer, I want to get my legal affairs in order. Well, sure you do. There are three things you need to do. The first thing you need to do in legal planning to get ready for retirement is to put in your own words, how do you want your estate distributed, or how do you want your assets to be distributed when you die? That's right, thank you. Just say it out loud. If it comes to your mind, just say it. Yeah, when you die. That's the first thing that the lawyers will tell you, and so you'll either prepare a will or a trust. And now that you have a will or a trust, that's the main thing that we will focus on in legal planning. The second document we will prepare is called a power of attorney. Who will manage my health care? Who will manage my finances if I get to a point that I can't manage them myself? And when does the power of attorney come to an end? When you die.
Or if the power of attorney is limited by time.
So either the power of attorney is limited by time, or more likely, when you are going to die, the power of attorney is going to come to an end. So another crass way of putting it is, who will manage my finances, my health care, until such time that I die? And the third document that you will prepare is called a living will or advance directive. Do I want a feeding tube if I was in a coma? In other words, how do I want to die? So do you get this picture now? That impressive looking binder that we have typically is getting us ready more around the death issues. Who gets what when I die? How do I want to die? And who's going to manage my stuff till I die? And there we are, if we have done this planning, which is we've enrolled in Medicare, we've looked at the housing issue, we've done a lot of financial planning, we've got all our legal affairs in order, all the documents that we need to have. We in our family are thinking that if I do this planning, then I should be set for retirement. And one of the things that I've come to say on my radio show over and over again, this is what I would term to be the traditional way the Americans get ready to retire. This planning, traditional retirement planning, will prove to be nothing short of a recipe for disaster for the average person who depends on this. Now that's a bold statement to make. This is one heck of a lot of work that people will go through. Why will this not prove to be enough planning? Here's why. So you're sitting at home one day, you've done all that work, and you're watching your favorite TV show, and right in the middle of the TV show, out of left field, out of nowhere at all, a massive headache just hits you. And somewhere in the pit of your stomach, you know, this is not your Tylenol headache, this is something more. And you're smart enough to pick up the phone, dial 911. EMTs come crashing through the door and say, glad you called, you're having a stroke. What are we dealing with? It's a health issue. How did we get ready for this day? Medicare supplement plan. So answer this. Do Medicare and your supplement insurance plan deliver everything you were expecting Medicare to deliver at this point? Right? And what a darn shame that we don't have faith in our system. We know there is something drastically wrong with our healthcare system. But I promise you, what is not wrong with our healthcare system is our ability to save our lives after we've had the stroke or the heart attack. Indeed, if you ever want to fall ill, hope to God you're on American soil when you have that medical episode. This is where we know how to keep people alive. And it is thanks to Medicare that the EMTs probably take you to the hospital. The doctor probably ends up saving your life. And after 2 days in the hospital, the doctor walks into your room and says, "Oh, Mr. Nagaich, the moment we wheeled you in, we drew some blood. I know exactly why you had the stroke and what you need to do so you don't have the next one." Would you be interested in this information? Right? Doesn't matter how much pain you're in, you kind of sit up. Yeah, this I want to hear. And here's what the doctor probably says to you. Are you ready for this? Quit eating Cheetos at 2 o'clock in the morning. Get up, exercise, lose weight, socialize, all of the things your doctors have been telling you to do that you have not done. And the reality is, I can't make you do those things any more than the other physicians that you work with will do. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll give you a bag full of pills and ask you to leave my hospital because I have 27 other patients right now in the emergency room who need this bed. But you can't go back home. Where do you end up? Sorry? Rehab. Now, what's another word for rehab? A nursing home. But no one looks at this as a nursing home so far. Why? Because this is a place where you're going to get physical, speech, occupational, some therapy that is designed to help you get better so you can get better and so you end up in this rehab center. Let's say it's a Monday morning at 10 o'clock. One look at the foyer of this place, what goes through your head?
I'm not leaving.
Uh-oh, I'm not leaving. Well, God, I hope you're thinking, yes, I'm leaving. But probably what you're hoping is, I'm leaving no later than this Friday. I will do everything you ask me to do. I want to be out of this joint no later than this by this Friday. So you do everything you ask you to do. What do they ask you to do in a rehab center? Eat right, exercise, they force it on you. And so you do that, and you're thinking, okay, Friday, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, everyone is leaving, no one's walking into your room. Boy, that's a bummer. Okay, next week, I'll redouble up my efforts. Next Friday, I'll be out of here. Next Friday comes and goes, you're still stuck there. And on Saturday, that person that you gave the power of attorney to, probably your spouse or your child, that person happens to walk in the room and says, "Oh, hi, Dad. Hi, Mom. Hi, honey. How are you?" What is your answer at this time? Yeah, don't you dare honey me. Did you bring the pickup truck? Right? And now this will become a housing issue. Now, mind you, this is not a housing issue for the person who is ill. This is a housing nightmare for every single person you promised you didn't want to become a. But this is the housing issue. But so far, so good financially speaking. Life is okay because who's going to be paying for this rehab stay in the rehab building? Who pays for the rehab?
Medicare for 90 days.
Medicare. Well, if you have traditional Medicare, it's up to 100 days. If you have Medicare Advantage, it'll be somewhere between 60 days to 120 days, depending on the plan you have, but it'll be somewhere about 100 days. Oh, 3+ months. How many people hang around rehab centers 3+ months? Except the second day that you got into this rehab center, the 10th day, the 12th day, 15th, 30th, 50th, 60th, someday well before your 100 days are over. On a Friday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, mind you, a nurse walks into the room and says, "Oh, Mr. Nagaich, you seem to have plateaued. You're not making progress anymore." And Medicare says they're going to stop paying your bills starting Monday. So what happened to my 100 days? It's up to 100 days. You have to do your part in it. So what are my choices? Well, you could go back home. And you schmuck, you really think that it's your gourmet dinners that's keeping me hanging around your beautiful facility here. There's some reason I can't go back home. What is my other choice? Well, you can stay here and you can pay privately. So if you had to stay privately in a rehab center, how much would you be paying? here in Alaska?
In a rehab center,
In a rehab center.
probably $7,000 to $9,000 a month.
Probably $7,000 to $9,000 a month
For private care,
for a private care. Go.
private care in your own home, 24-hour care is $18,500.
So if we were getting private care in your own home, it's $18,500. Now remember, we're talking about rehab at this point in time. We want an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, a physical therapist, someone to come help with us. Your cost in Alaska is about $15,000 to $20,000 each and every single month. As soon as you hear that number, what's going to go through your head is, quit holding my hand, I'll walk down the hallway on my own, I don't need this therapy anymore. As soon as you say that, you will become a long-term care resident in the nursing home part, probably of the same building, where your costs will tumble down to between $10,000 to $15,000 a month. And either way you take a look at it, for the average person now, this will become a financial issue. Now, mind you, this is where we did most of our retirement planning. And if you are lucky, somebody will say to you, you need to go see an elder law attorney. And your quick answer will be, what the heck do I need to see a lawyer for? I've got my will, trust, powers, I've got all those documents. I've got that impressive looking binder at home. No, these attorneys do different work. The first thing they will help you do is to find a way to cope with these crazy expenses looking at VA, Medicare, Medicaid, all those other programs that we probably don't take a look at. But the more important thing a good elder law attorney will do is to help you realize the real issue burning at this point in time is not how to just protect your money. The real issue is, how do you take a look at your loved one's life, husband, wife, mom or dad, whose ever life you're looking at. How do you look at that life and say, the real goal is, how do I give this person a good quality of life, as good as possible under the conditions, hopefully without them running out of money and without me losing my sanity in the process. How many of you in this room have taken care of a parent or a loved one when they became incapacitated? And how many of you actually came close to losing your sanity over the process? Right? But that's never how we approach the issue. And either way you look at it, this will now become a legal issue. And the interesting thing is this, to get this far, think about all the professionals that we have in our lives. Do we see doctors from time to time? We all have doctors. Many of us probably looked at the housing issue. A few of us downsized, moved, so we went to a real estate agent. A realtor was involved. Many of us will consult with financial planners. Many of us will go down to lawyers. Which one of these professionals do you want me as a lawyer to sue? Who should have caught this issue well ahead of time? And the answer is, you can't sue anyone, because everyone in this equation is doing exactly what they're expected to do. The doctor, you go down to the hospital, well, I saved your life. It's not my concern as to what it does to your finances when you go to a rehab center. You should say, thank you, be on your way, I've done what I was supposed to do. The financial planner looked at the whole issue and said, look, you need to go buy a long-term care insurance policy. Many of us looked at that policy and said, boy, if I'm going to pay that kind of money to an insurance company for a product I may never end up using, I would be better off putting that money in the bank account. I'll take it out when the time comes. So the financial planner says, well, I did my job, don't blame me. The lawyers are saying, die planning, I did my job. And the sad reality is, each and every single day, every professional that we look to in retirement is doing their job. And when this episode happens, not to one of these people did we ever go and say that whatever else you're going to do to help me for retirement planning, please help me with these 3 more basic goals. I would like to live a retirement life without the fear of being thrown into a nursing home against my wishes, running out of money and becoming a burden to my children. So you can't really blame anyone, because everyone is doing everything that they were supposed to do. The reason why I'm so clear about all this issue is this story that I've just shared with you is the story of this couple called Bill and Vivian Wallace. Born and raised in Spokane, Washington, you're quintessential middle-class Americans who built their retirement dreams around this crazy simple notion that if by the time we retire, we have a house that is paid for, a few $100,000s in the bank, then surely between our debt-free lifestyle that we are living, Social Security, Medicare, we should be able to skate through retirement. Bill was working as a mail carrier for the postal system. Vivian was working as a nurse for the hospital systems. And the day Bill was going to retire, Bill and Vivian were both going to jump in the RV and go do the American highways and the byways. The RV, in this case, never left the house. Why? Because Bill gets diagnosed with Alzheimer's the last year of his work life. So Vivian, who's a nurse, she's looking at the situation and saying, well, at least I'm a nurse. I'll see to it that my husband doesn't have to go to a nursing home. And for 6 to 7 years, she bashes her head against the wall. And when Bill's condition progresses to a point where he stops recognizing Vivian on most days, and he starts wandering away from the house, looking for his wife, looking for his house, she then goes to the person of last resort, in that case, the doctor, and says, Doc, I need help. I can't take care of 5 acres of land, and Bill, I need some serious help. And the doctor looks right back at her and says, Vivian, you're a nurse. You should know better than this. There is no answer to what Bill has. Bill belongs in a, and this is your prototypical 6 to 7 year journey, where a spouse will bash their head against the wall bloody, till just there is no other way, and so Bill then moves to the nursing home. The first time that I get to meet Bill was when he was already in the nursing home setting, and my introduction was that young lady sitting in Vivian's lap, who was insured by all state insurance companies. And at that time, I was working as a sales manager for all state insurance companies. I did not jump on my flying carpet and come to America to become this hotshot lawyer. I am your prototypical first-generation foreigner who comes to America thinking, oh, the streets of America are paved to gold. Now raise your hands if you buy that story. What a darn shame you don't. You know, I have 3 kids, and I raise them and I remind them, I say, you will never know how true that statement is, that axiom is. All you have to do to succeed in America is you work hard, you play by the rules, you persevere. There's no guarantee to success. But if there's any opportunity for success, it is the best opportunity here. And that took me to Allstate insurance companies. Jamie was insured by Allstate. She had wrecked her car on the way to Spokane from Seattle. And the good hands, they had come apart. And somebody had dumped her file on my desk, go make her a happy client. And in one of those phone conversations with her, she asked me, oh, could I ask you a personal question? I said, yeah, sure, what? She says, where are you from? I said, from India. She says, oh, I thought so. My sister-in-law is from India. That then opened the door to a personal conversation. And after we settled the claim, I asked her to marry me. She said, yes, as a score. And then we went to Spokane to see her side of the family. So we left on a Friday, stayed with her mom, met her sisters, nieces, nephews on Saturday. And on Sunday on the way back, she says, I want to stop and say hi to my dad. Now, I knew Bill had Alzheimer's, didn't really understand what Alzheimer's was. I knew he lived in a nursing home. I promise you, I didn't have a concept of a place called a nursing home. And we went to this nursing home, spent 2 very awkward hours. Bill had lost his speech by now, looked at Jamie, recognized her instantly, burst out in the biggest of grins. And after about 2 hours, we are trying to say our goodbyes, and there is Bill hanging on to Jamie, thinking that she was there to take him home. And she was just bawling. And we were standing near one of those doors where you can enter the key code to get out of the place. And some worker notices this commotion, comes running over, taps Bill on the shoulder long enough to distract him. So we could enter the key code and get out of the place. And the door shuts. And for the first time in so many years in America, I walk away asking myself, how does the richest country in the entire world take care of the old people when they can no longer care for themselves? And the reason why that's such a easy reaction for someone like me to have is the so-called third world that I come from. I see all 4 of my grandparents take their last breath sleeping on the same pillow they've always slept on, always surrounded by their, and that's the third world. So Jamie and I get married. We asked Vivian to move in with us, which after hemming and hawing for a good 6 months, oh no, I don't want to be a burden to you. And so what burden are you talking about? I grew up in a house with 16 of us under the same roof. There's not enough of you in the family. She finally moves over, and we moved Bill from the nursing home in Spokane to a nursing home in Des Moines, Washington, which is about 11 miles north of Federal Way, where we were living, even though in the city of Federal Way, there were 4 nursing homes within 5 minutes of our house. Why would you go 15, 20 minutes north? Quality of care, she says. I don't think so. Think about how the average person is going to ultimately find a place. It's not even the cost. It's ultimately you're going to use the highly scientific smell test. We can talk about cost, we can talk about quality of care, we can talk about all of those things, but how do you measure it? And that's what Vivian and Jamie did. They went and visited a bunch of places, and this is where they said, this looks okay, and so Bill gets moved here. Now that he has moved to Seattle, I get to see him every day. He was no longer walking, he was no longer ambulating, he was not even in a locked unit, he was in a general ward. And every time that I would go see Bill, I would either find him in bed or I'd find him in a wheelchair. I'm scratching my head and saying, why is this man in the nursing home? Oh, because he's incontinent, he's unambulatory, he needs people to care for him. Really? I mean, if that is the litmus test why the average human being should no longer be able to stay at home, then about a third of the real world should be living in some jungle somewhere. I mean, this is just preposterous. What happens to us as we age is nothing extraordinary. It happens the world over. But how we deal with this aging issue is utterly extraordinary. Is there a way we could take him back home? Of course there is. What does that look like? Oh, you just hire a bunch of people, go take care of him at home. Oh, so it's a financial issue. And talking about finances, remember the house that was paid for, a few $100,000 in the bank? By the time Vivian moved into our house, all of that money had been drained down. The only asset Vivian had to her name was a house she had downsized from 5 acres to a smaller house to take care of Bill, worth $60,000. And someone in Spokane, in the nursing home, had looked at her and said, oh, Mrs. Wallace, you need to look into Medicaid. And her gut reaction was, oh, Medicaid is a welfare program. We are not welfare people. Oh, no, Mrs. Wallace, this is the program that will pay for your husband to be able to access care in the nursing home. And our government was paying about $5,500 each month to this nursing home to take care of Bill. And I'm saying, well, how much will it cost if we did take Bill at home? Well, it depends how much care you need. Arguably, if you need 24/7 care, it'll be more expensive at home than it is in the nursing home, because in the nursing home, you spread the cost amongst a lot of people. At home, it's one-on-one care. But I'm looking at Bill and saying, this man is nowhere getting 24/7 care. He gets some people to come, get him out of bed in the morning, clean him once a week, twice a week they shave him. Once a week they give him a shower, take him down to the dining room. There he's sitting around a horseshoe table, 6 people sitting on the outside, one person feeding 6 people who could not be fed, in my opinion, even one-on-one in 1 hour. But you got one person feeding 6 of these people, and after 1 hour, they clean them up, they put them in some hallway, or they put them in front of a TV. Then someone comes and puts them in bed, and they're in that room. They repeat that in the afternoon, repeat that in the evening. When is the last time that you go to a nursing home and find the people who are living there are actually outside in the sun, in the gardens, that these places will spend thousands of dollars creating? You almost never do. Then what in the world are we doing all this for? The average person doesn't get 24/7 care. The average person has access to 24/7 care for about half the amount of money the government was paying the nursing home. We could hire somebody to come help us in the morning and help us a little in the evening, and we could bring our dad back home. Great, let's be the first ones to stand in line and go to Medicaid and say, oh, we'd like to save you money. I'm sure in every language that you're printing these brochures, you will send us a thank you card in each language that we are going to be doing. And the answer comes back is, no, the program Mr. Wallace is on allows him to access Medicaid in the nursing home setting. You can take him home, you would have to pay privately. How does this crazy system work? We're paying twice the amount of money for a person to be in a place where he'd much rather not be, when his family is willing to do what is the right thing for this family to do, And we as a society are paying twice the amount of money. Well, those are the rules, we don't make the rules. So then I started going to look for a lawyer. Now remember I said, if you're lucky, somebody will say, go see an elder law attorney. Because when you're not a lawyer, how would you know the difference between elder law and estate planning and family law and business law? At least to me, I didn't know the distinctions. And so the attorney that I found happened to be a part-time judge in the SeaTac Municipal Court in private practice with his son and daughter, a guy called Paul Codd in Vivian, Washington. An elderly gentleman, he listens to my story for a good half an hour and says, Raj, I know what Medicaid is. I know how to get people on Medicaid. I have not a clue how to get Medicaid to pay for your dad to come back home. That took me back to law school in '99. This is just craziness. And the day that I take my last final exam is the day Bill takes his last breath in the nursing home. By second year law school, I figured out there's no truth to the fact Medicaid does cover care at home. But which Starbucks are you going to go to meet Mr. Medicaid? Indeed, who is Mr. Medicaid? It's the social worker working in the hospital or the nursing home who is going to give you information. Now ask yourself this, how much education will a social worker, an overworked, underpaid employee, have about these highly complicated programs, VA, Medicare, and Medicaid? But that's how the information travels, and we got the information thinking there's no answer, so Bill dies in the nursing home. Vivian lived with us another 6 years after Bill's passing. She died of kidney cancer that had metastasized to her bones. And if you know of anyone with bone cancer, incontinent, unambulatory, unable to care for her needs. Here's a poster child of somebody who should have spent somewhere between 6 months to something longer in some care facility somewhere. And Vivian got to take her last breath, sleeping in the same pillow she'd always slept on, surrounded by her. And not for one single day did we look to Medicaid to help us in any way, shape, or form. And for about 13, 14 years now, I've been bringing the same message. It is not the lack of rules or the laws that get us to where we are. It is the utter and sheer lack of understanding about the multidisciplinary nature of retirement and our utter failure to coordinate the work that many bright, brilliant, well-meaning professionals do for us in our lives. Because in the end, if you follow the ball, it is a pretty simple equation. Problems in retirement for the average retiree will usually start off as a health issue. They'll almost instantly become a housing issue. For many, they'll become a financial issue. And if you are lucky, somebody will turn it into a legal issue. And all along the way, it's a family affair. It doesn't matter how much you say you don't want to be a burden on your loved ones. The moment you're ill, your family is involved in your mess. The only question is, how well prepared are they and how much time do they have? And the rest of the seminar that I do is about the hopeful part of things. This is the ugly part of retirement. But how do you change this? And my answer is pretty simple. The first thing that you have to do is you have to define what your goals in retirement are. For too long, I think what has happened in America is we have ceded the retirement planning process to industries. We go to a doctor when does the average person go see a doctor? When you have a problem of some sort, right? So you go down to the doctor, and the medical community has come up with all sorts of fantastic answers to create our problems when we have. You go down to realtors when you want to go buy a house, usually when you're in good health. You go down to financial planners and say, well, what financial planning do we need to do? The financial planners have come up with their idea about what financial planning should be. You go to lawyers, well, Mr. Lawyer, what should I do? That's what I am, a lawyer by education. They taught us in law school exactly what answers I'm supposed to give you, so we give you those answers, and we buy as consumers all these answers, and we almost every single time we miss the mark, because if you look deep into your heart, the goal is not die planning. The goal is help me so I don't end up in a nursing home. Help me so I can conduct my life so I don't become a burden to my children, run out of money. So where do you start? And my starting point is pretty darn simple. Here is a lawyer's prescription for you never ending up in a nursing home. So if you have a pen, pencil, take it out, start writing. Here's the prescription. Don't fall ill. Isn't that a simple equation? Who do you not find in a nursing home? People who are not ill. And what do you do to not fall ill? Here's what you do. You eat right, you exercise, you socialize, and you have the right people on your medical team. Now, who's going to make you do the first three things? Eat right, exercise, socialize. You got to do it yourself. There's no one you can blame for that one. But can you do something about having the right people on your medical team? So, there's a study that was done at the University of Minnesota. They called up, in this study, the doctor, a physician called Chad Bolt, looked at 568 people, each and every single one of these people being over the age of 70. And in the mind of this researcher, each and every one of these people were about to have some medical episode. Either cognitive decline or functional decline, something was going to happen. And he then divides this group into two groups, and says, one group, to the first group, he says, you go see your regular doctors, whoever you're seeing. So let's define that for a second. If you access medicine, what is the specialty of the primary care physician that you see when you have any symptoms that are happening? Who's the first go-to person? What's the specialty?
GP.
A GP, but more specifically, family practice or internal medicine. Those are the two specialties you have in medicine. So he takes this group and says, go see your GPs, your internal medicine, family medicine guys, and he actually writes a letter to each one of these physicians. He says, look, we're doing this study, we're following your patients, we think they're at a high risk of falling ill, you should keep an eye on these people. So he puts the doctors on alert. The other group, he says, go see this group of specialists. 18 months after the study commences, he looks at the results and finds out that 10% of the people in each one of these groups actually had died. So 6 people had died, 3 in each group. So the specialists were not keeping people living longer. But then when you start looking at the other results, here's the other results. People who were seeing specialists, they were experiencing depression 50% less compared to the people who were seeing internal medicine and family medicine. They were using home care and home health 40% less compared to the people who were seeing internal medicine and family medicine. And they were experiencing disabilities 25% less compared to people who were seeing internal medicine and family medicine. The middle one is that gets me. 40% less use of home care and home health. What does that mean to a person? What does life look like when you don't need home care and home health? I'm nowhere close to a nursing home. That's what it means. And the first thing that comes to this lawyer's mind is, how would you like to lower your risk of going to a nursing home by 40% without spending a penny more out of your pocket in the insurance industry? How many of you would like to lower your risk by 40%? And how many of you, before you signed last year on your supplement policy, insisted, I will only give you my money if you can show me you have a large enough pool of these specialists called geriatric care physicians? It's just bizarre. We know they're there. Where is the medical industry educating us about the need for geriatrics? But there's a lot of education about pediatrics, isn't there? If you have a child under the age of 10 who falls ill, and you can take this child to your doctor or to a pediatric doctor, which doctor are you going to usually pick? Pediatric. Why? They're specialists. Does it mean that your doctor doesn't know how to cure a flu or to treat some basic illness? No, they know that, but they may miss out on symptoms. And same way, when you cross the age of 70, there's a clear demarcation. The physiology of people over the age of 70 is significantly different than the other people, and it doesn't cost any more to you as a consumer if you're seeing a geriatric care physician or if you're seeing an internal medicine doctor. But insurance companies are amiss in all of this. They don't care. They just say, go pick one. The problem with geriatrics turns out you don't have enough of them. Right? That's one of the basic drawbacks that you'll hear. Well, there are not enough of them. In the Seattle market where I am, here's what I say to people. They're enough that if you really put your mind to it, no, everyone's oblivious to the whole thing. You just need to put your mind to it. So the first thing we do in my law practice, is when somebody becomes a client, the first thing I'm going to do is to which insurance company do you have and give you a list of geriatric doctors and say, go make it your mission to get yourself in the hands of a geriatric care physician. It may take you 3 to 4 or 5 years because most of these practices are quite full. And when somebody graduates from that practice, you can slip in there. So that's the first thing you do. The second thing, that's just one example of how we can take our healthcare system and approach it from a prevention point of view. Because the medical model right now, there is so much money to be made in interventional medicine, and there's so little money to be made in preventative care that there's hardly any education that's being done about the prevention, even though we know it. Eat right, exercise, socialize, and have the right people on your medical team. That's healthcare. If that kind of catches your attention, the second issue should simply blow your mind away. I say that not lightly, because every time I come to this slide and I repeat that, and it's like thousands of times I've done this, it blows my mind away. Here's why. This is a Stanford University study. It's a 2016 study that I'm quoting here. So University of Stanford, they call people all across the country. So it's not a regional study, it's a national study. They call people all around the country and they ask people one question. If you could choose the venue where you want to be when you're taking your last breath, where would you want to be when you're taking that last breath? Home, right? Overwhelmingly large number of Americans, 80% in this case, are saying, I want to be able to live my life out in my own home. Less than 20% of Americans actually realize that hope. Less than 20% of Americans die at home. More than 80% of Americans die in hospitals, hospice homes, assisted living facilities, nursing homes, someplace where they don't want to be. The reason why this is interesting to me is because when I look at the world that I grew up in, India, the average Indian will wake up every day. 1.2 billion Indians will wake up every day, fully expecting to live their lives in their own home. The average Indian actually realizing that goal. The exception there is you didn't die at home. The exception in America is you died at home. That's the interesting part of the equation. Here comes the mind-blowing part of the equation. Right in the middle of this reality, where most of us would rather live our lives at home, less than 20% do, there actually exists an industry dedicated to serve a few of us in this crowd, not everyone sadly, but just a few of us in this crowd. And this industry will say that if you ever reach that station in life, that you have to choose home care or institutional care, and you're going to pick home care, this industry will leave no stone unturned to help bring you back home. And I promise you, every one of us in this room knows the name of that industry. I'm sorry? Hospice, that's right. But who is hospice available to when you have less than
6 months.
6 months to live? That's what I said. It's not available to everyone, right? So what is the magic of hospice? The magic of hospice is this. Oh, Rajiv, good news, bad news. Good news, you live. Bad news, not more than 6 months. So now I have become hospice eligible because less than 6 months in the hospice world means I'm terminally ill. How would you like to live out the last 6 months of your life in your own home? Of course I would. Who would not? All right, so let's see what it'll take to make it happen. The first thing you have to do, quit trying to get better. Right? That's the first threshold. Quit trying to get better. No curative cure. But if you want to stay comfortable, let's send out a social worker, a occupational therapist, a physical therapist, somebody go to Rajiv's house, take a look at his house. What will it take for him to go back home? They scan the environment, say, oh, he needs a hospital bed, respirator, grab bars, safety equipment, make it all happen. Oh, send a nurse there. He might need some nurse to administer his medications. Send a bath aide to attend to his hygiene needs. Send a spiritual advisor to help Rajiv and all the family members that Rajiv is dealing with. This is a hard time in people's lives. It's not every day that somebody goes through this. They might need some counseling. Send the spiritual advisor. Oh, and don't stop there. Make sure that every single family member has an 800 number, which they are able to call at 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Nobody should ever feel that they're alone in this journey. They'll always have someone to walk this walk with them. All of a sudden, your family is thinking, oh, I think I can do this. And that was Vivian in our case. So what happens to people when you have 6 months and 1 day to live? And what happens is my mom. She had a heart attack. This is about 3 years ago. Just before she was going to fly to India, she has a heart attack. We take her down to the hospital in Tacoma, St. Joe's. They put a stent in her heart, and they say, oh, she's got a leaky valve. We need to bring her back for a mitral valve replacement surgery. Now, how many of you know what a mitral valve replacement surgery is? Anyone? Okay. A mitral valve replacement surgery is the most bizarre thing. It's the most extreme thing that you can do to a human being. She's got a bad valve. So they have to get to the bad valve. So they cut her open, they saw her sternum, they pull the chest apart. They put their hand on the heart, they stop the heart. They cut the heart open. They put the hand on the valve, they cut out the bad valve, throw that out, stick a new one in, reverse engineer. It's the most bizarre thing that you can ever think a human being is going to go through, but they have the science to do that. And after about a week in the hospital, here comes the discharge planner. Oh, Mr. Nagaich, which rehab center is your mom going to go to? Oh, she's not going to a rehab center. We're going to take her back home. We plan to take her back home. Oh, you couldn't do that. Why couldn't I do that? You don't know what you're getting into. I'm saying, oh, honey, you don't have a clue what I do for a living. For 12 years, I've been blaring my lungs out on the radio to people. There is no magic to a place of care. It's a place of care. Tell me, which rehab center should I take my mom to who, after anesthesia, is plucking things out of the air? She's talking to people who've been long dead. And she's speaking to everyone in Hindi. Which rehab center do I take her to and not find myself attached to the hip 24/7 with her? And that being the case, she is going to go back home. She leaves, the supervisor comes in, supervisor leaves, the doctor comes in. Here's the doctor who's done the surgery. He listens to me on the radio week after week. And I'm saying, John, if I let my mom go to the rehab center, I'll be the biggest damn hypocrite in town. She is going to have to go back home. And he helps pull it all together, and he goes back home. And my mom actually goes back home. And I'm not trying to minimize what it takes to bring people back home. What I'm trying to highlight is, if you have the willingness and a plan, you can actually accomplish that without become a total burden on your family members. And the point that I will make with that story is this. Change places with my mom for a second. Let's say you're in that rehab center, in the hospital. And you have that power of attorney, which I'm assuming most of us in this room probably have that document. That person you've given the power of attorney to is standing in front of the nurse, and the nurse is asking the question to your power of attorney. Your dad has done pretty well. Your mom has done pretty well through surgery. I think she's going to do just fine. But she can't go back home. Which rehab center do you want to take your mom or dad to? What answer comes out of that agent's mouth? What answer do you think is going to come out of that person's mouth, whether it's your spouse or your child? It doesn't matter. What answer comes out? Sorry?
What do you think?
What do you think? Which is the closest one? Which is the best one? Why is the answer, oh no, she's not going to go to rehab center, she's going to come back home? Is because the way you have planned. You have planned that day that your agent is going to be asking, which one do you suggest? Why do I say that? What do you mean the planning I've done? I've not done any planning around that. Heck, I haven't even thought about that. No, you've done the planning. Here's why you've done the planning. You've gone to a lawyer and said, I want to do some legal planning. I don't want to be a burden on my children. The lawyer said, well, you need to prepare a power of attorney. The power of attorney says, oh, honey, you love of my life, you son of mine, I didn't send you to USC in California and burn thousands of dollars to raise a dummy. I know you're smart. Here's the legal authority I'm giving you. You can make whatever decisions you need to go ahead and make. You'll figure it out. Figure what out? You never say that. Why would your stupid power of attorney not be more specific in saying the moment that I fall ill, I am going to require you to follow a certain path. And that path is going to take me to a certain outcome. And the outcome that I'm looking for is the moment I fall ill, I am going to require you to hire the services of that hospice type of a person, usually called a geriatric care manager. And the first question you're going to be asking this geriatric care manager is, I've got a dad or a mom who the hospital wants to discharge to a rehab center. I had promised my parents I would leave no stone unturned to find a way to bring that back home. I have not a foggiest clue how I'm going to make this happen, but you do. And I'm going to pay you using my mom and dad's money. You're going to help me figure out how to bring them back home. And then you turn to the discharge nurse and say, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but this person does. Sort it out between you. I'll see you at home. I want my mom and dad coming back home. Why would we not want to go ahead and have a power of attorney that is more specific and does what it is designed to do, rather than having these absurd assumptions about somehow a beam of wisdom will somehow hit your agent and they'll know magically all the answers. And the reality is there's no beam, because there was no planning around this. There was no visualization to the whole thing. The point that I'm making to you is this. If you do the planning properly, and you can do the planning, you should have an 80% chance of being able to live your life the way you want to, which is hopefully coming back home. But you must have done all the planning ahead of time. You cannot be living on a 4-story home on the mountain here that overlooks this bay. Great exercise going up and down while we can walk. The day you fall down, break your hip, is the reason why you can't go back to that home, because it's 4 stories. You would have to look at your financial issues. Wanting to stay at home means I'll have to hire people coming to the house. Do we have the financial depth to be able to afford that? If not, what do I need to do to go and create the financial depth? And how certain am I that the day that I fall ill, I will have the backing of my family behind me? And if you don't have all of that lined up, or you're of the mindset, I don't know whether I want to put those responsibilities on my children, then why don't we look at life a little bit differently and look at a retirement community as maybe a possible alternative? Well, not just any retirement community, only that retirement community where I can go and I can get something in writing that promises me that once you move here, you will never have to move out of this place again. If your money runs out, we will accept VA, Medicare, Medicaid. If your health fails you, we've got every level of care here. And I don't know where you fall in this debate, but the reality is the housing decision must be made keeping in mind aging is a family affair. At some point in time, your children are going to be involved in your life, and maybe it is appropriate for you to think about what action you want them to take, how you want them to behave, but then take their input into account before you make the decisions, and do your legal planning, your financial planning, and your housing planning so that they're all lined up in the same direction. That's housing. Then you take a look at financial planning. To the average person, financial planning is about investing money, and I'm saying poppycock. The question that's never asked in financial planning, which is far more important than how much money you have and how do you invest your money, is not how much money you have, but what assurance do you have the day you fall ill, the people you're leaving in charge of your finances, they will know how to use your money to give you a life which is in keeping with your expectations. Which commercial do you see from financial planning outfits asking that question? Fidelity is asking a question, how long is this tape going to go? Prudential is asking a question, how far do you go before the light stops and then your money has run out? But where is the question being asked that whatever amount of money I have, a small amount, a large amount, that people will know how to make it stretch without me turning out to be a burden on them, in the sense that they will have to become my caregivers. But we never ask the question, and that question should be the more central question that we are asking. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor. And if you have an estate that is worth less than $2 million, the question that should be asked is, what is my biggest financial threat as I go into retirement? And what you will find is the single biggest threat the average American with under $2 million faces is the threat that in retirement you fall ill and Medicare says we don't cover that illness. Why would Medicare not cover any illness? Because Medicare, right from inception, has created a distinction between acute care and long-term care, and they said we never cover long-term care, we only cover acute care. What the heck is acute care? You go to a doctor and say, Doc, I got a problem. I need, and the doctor says, well, I think I can do something for you. I can give you a pill, I can cut you open, I can give you therapy, I can put a cast on your broken bone, I can make you a bionic human being, artificial knees, hips, or shoulders. Anything where the medical community can make money from your misery, that's acute care. Yes, it's covered under Medicare. If there is an issue that you're dealing with where the medical community, the established medical community, cannot make money, So you had a stroke, yeah, that was covered. You went to the hospital, that was covered. You got therapy in the rehab center, that was covered. You're plateaued, you're not making progress anymore. Medicare says no more coverage. From this point on, the reason why Medicare is not going to cover anything is because they're saying you don't need any medicine. What you need is someone to cook for you, clean for you, get you out of bed, get you into the shower. Everything that is done by home health, home care, and assisted living, we don't cover any of those things. So long-term care is what is not covered by the Medicare system. But long-term care insurance policy covers it. Yeah, the reality is less than 7% of Americans have an effective policy. If you're still working, should you buy one? You would be crazy not to take a look at it. But when you go look for a long-term care insurance policy, who do you think who would be the go-to person for you to get information about whether you should buy a policy or not? Who would you react to? Who would you go to? An insurance agent, probably, right? Either I'm putting you to sleep or you're going to put me to sleep. So we have to do something up here. If you are going to be looking at a long-term care insurance policy, you're probably going to look for a long-term care insurance agent, the last person you should go to get information on that stuff. Now, mind you, I was an insurance agent. I promise you, I didn't wake up any day thinking, well, whose life do I want to mess up today? And it is quite the opposite. You know, as professionals, no matter which profession we are in, we will work hard to make sure that we can put our best foot forward and do the best for our clients. And here's the problem with insurance agents when you're going to go with them. Every insurance agent from the core of their being will believe you should buy a long-term care insurance policy. And I will agree with them. Having a long-term care policy gives much better outcomes for people in their lives. But whether you should own the policy or not is not a question of whether it's good or not. The real question in long-term care policy is 15, 20 years from today when I am retired on a fixed income, and the premiums have doubled or, God forbid, tripled by then, will my fixed income be able to allow me to afford that premium? That is not a calculation the average insurance agent is going to do. This is a financial issue. You have to turn to your financial planner, and he has to or she has to look at what your retirement income is going to be, what kind of expenses are you going to have. If you can afford that premium, then yes, you should be looking at buying the policy. And if you can't afford it, then you have to take a look at your alternatives. And sadly, the alternatives are you can pay privately. So here in Alaska, a nursing home can be upward of $30,000. In Seattle, it's more like $9,000 to $12,000. But in Alaska, you're the second most costliest place for long-term care in America. Pretty expensive. Then you take a look at VA and Medicaid cover that bill. And remember I said that the industry has kind of figured out, we have ceded our planning to the industry. We go to the industry, how do you think we should plan? The industry has come up with an answer, you should go buy a long-term care insurance policy. Now answer this, the moment you say you don't want to buy a long-term care insurance policy, how much education did the industry give you about, well, if you're going to make this crazy decision not to buy a policy, at least understand how VA and Medicare work. But there's never that education. Why? Because the industry's answers are built on one basic premise. Whatever solution we're going to give you must first serve the industry before it's going to serve you. If it does not serve the industry, that answer is probably not going to be part of your bailiwick. That means you must educate yourself about the issues. You must go to professionals in whatever profession, lawyers and doctors and financial planners. You must be the one in charge and saying, these are the goals I want you to go ahead and help me with, and we cannot cede that responsibility to them because that is not working out too good. So, VA and Medicaid, how they work? Pretty darn simple. Spend your money down to almost nothing, then come look us up, we'll cover your bills. Right? Isn't that how they work? Here's how Medicaid works. So we'll first talk about married people, and then we'll go to single people. So remember the example we started off with, Bill and Vivian. Bill had Alzheimer's, Vivian had the gum chum to try and keep him at home for a long time, right? That's the example. Let's build on that. Bill and Vivian have a house, they have a car, they have got about $400,000 in other assets. Is everyone with me on this example? Right? Married couple, house, car, how much money? $400,000. Bill has Alzheimer's. Vivian goes to Bill and goes to the Medicaid system and says, hey, I hear you help people like me. Medicaid says, of course we do. We're built to help people like you, Vivian. Show us that Bill only has how much money? How does that make you feel? That's the problem. right? But if you're married, what else do you have? A house? No, more important than that. A spouse. We forget about that person usually. And if you happen to have a spouse, here's what Medicaid says. Bill, you can only have $2,000, but Vivian, you as his wife, you can have one house of any value, one car of any value, about $123,600 in other assets. You can have prepaid funeral plan, burial plots, cash value in a life insurance policy, all the personal property in the world you've got, and you can have an unlimited amount of income. Tell me, where does it say that Bill and Vivian had to be broke in order for Medicaid to have covered Bill's care needs? It never has. You move the money out of Vivian's name, you put it in Bill's name. You put the money out of Bill's name, put it in Vivian's name. The problem is, Vivian and Bill have $400,000. Vivian can only have how much money? $123,000. So I got too much money. So she goes to an insurance company the night before she applies for Medicaid, says, I'm going to hand you this money, return this to Vivian in form of a monthly income over the next 5 years. She gets the money back, Bill's long-term care bills get covered immediately. The problem is not when you're married, the problem is when you're single. As a single person, how much money can you have? What don't you have as a single person? So unless you want to rent a spouse, right? This is the real problem. Even though rules say, no, you can have a house, you can have a car, you can have prepaid funeral plan, burial plots, cash value, personal property. But what? The moment you pass away, your will, where you said, I leave everything to my children, has been scrubbed and rewritten to say, when I die, I leave everything to state to pay back the state. If there's any excess left over after the state has been paid back, that could go to my children. About the only real answer for single people is you got to get rid of your money, you can't have it to your name, and Medicaid has a different rule for that. Have you given away any assets in the last 5 years? So you had better have done your planning 5 years before you fall ill. Just keep that in mind. Now remember, we're talking finances and financial planners and financial planning. How many of you have some form of a retirement asset, IRA, 401k, or 457, 403b, something like that, KTOO, simple IRA, etc. Now, when we move an asset out of Bill's name and put it in Vivian's name, let's take the house. When the house got moved out of Bill's name to Vivian's name, what kind of taxes were paid on that transaction? None, because no money changed hands. What kind of taxes were paid when the car was moved out of Bill's name, put in Vivian's name? None. What kind of taxes were paid when we moved $400,000 in a savings account, in a brokerage account to Vivian? None. What kind of taxes were paid when we moved $400,000 from an IRA or a 401k from Bill to Vivian? Don't you dare say none. Right? Remember the deal that we made with the IRA devil? I put the money in pre-tax, I take it out, taxable income, and by the way, you're required to take that money out when you turn 70 and a half. Where is your financial planner? Why is this not a mainstay in financial planning where somebody is looking and saying, if there is any possibility that you may have to move these assets out of your name for whatever purpose, let's start moving this money into a Roth 401k, a Roth IRA. If you're still working, start boosting your Roth accounts before you start boosting your regular accounts. Why is this wisdom now? Why is a lawyer talking to you about all this stuff? It's because these are not the normal answers, and you have to be armed with this information. And as a lawyer, there's so many other issues that I help clients with. When should you retire? When should you start Social Security? If you work for the government and you can take a deferred comp as a lump sum or a monthly payment, which will be the better answer for you? If you're in a small to medium-sized estate, chances that you may ever have to look to the VA, the Medicaid system, it would be better for you to take the money in a lump sum, because under Medicaid rules, we can protect money, assets, we can never protect income. These are all the issues you have to go. So you have to be prepared to go to a financial planner with a predetermined list of questions you want the planners to help you with. You cannot just go down and say, well, what do you think I should do? That's financial issues. Then you take a look at legal planning. And the two concepts that I think most often get missed in legal planning is this notion called a safe harbor trust and the way the powers of attorney are written. So let's talk about what a safe harbor trust is. So I'm going to talk about first about married people, how the planning could be done differently, and then I'll come to single people. Married couple, Bill and Vivian, $700,000 estate, 300 home, 400 other assets. Right? This is the example that I had given. Now, Alaska happens to be a community property state. What does community property mean? Sorry?
We're not a community property state.
You can opt into a community property system. Believe it or not, from a legal perspective, we are, for estate planning purposes, we are a community because you can opt in. It's not an automatic, it's an opt-in state. So in the state of Washington, which is a pure community property state, I think the rules work very similar. So what would community property mean? It's 50-50 between a husband and wife. You've been married long enough, whatever you bring in is 50-50. It doesn't matter whether your name is on the asset or not. Right? So it's a 50-50 proposition. Now answer this riddle. When you die, must you leave your 50% to your spouse? Does the law require that when you're dead and you happen to be married, you must leave your 50% to your spouse? What do you think?
No.
No. And you would be correct in saying that. Now, everyone who's married in this room, I'm looking at your will, your trust, and I'm reading that paragraph that says, when I die, I'm leaving my 50% to, whose name am I finding there right now? Spouse. Why? Sorry?
No taxes?
No taxes? Yeah, but unless until you've got a estate of 11.2 million through 2025, mind you, you don't have estate taxes to worry about, or 5.45 million or 5.9 million dollars, whatever numbers you want to live. Estate taxes is not the average person's issue these days. But why are we giving to the spouse? Oh, because the lawyer told me so, because it feels at the gut level, it feels the right thing to do, because my spouse has suffered enough already. Could be whatever number of reasons. Now, see how well it works out. Bill and Vivian. Bill, 350, Vivian, 350. Bill dies, didn't have to leave his money to Vivian, leaves it to Vivian, right thing to do. Vivian has her 350, gets Bill's 350. How much money does she have now? 700. She is now single. She is now single. As a single person, if she ever needed to access long-term care under the VA, the Medicaid system, let's talk Medicaid. How much money can she have to her name? How much money would she have to spend down? Why in the world are we so eager to go ahead and do that when instead we should be saying, when I die, whether it's community property or not, under whatever theory, I'm leaving my half or my share of the estate, whatever that amount is, to a safe harbor trust for my spouse. My spouse has $350,000. If she falls ill, she'll have to spend that down to nothing. Nothing I can do about that. But where will the spouse get the cheek to say, I will never die broke? I will never become a financial burden to my children. Medicaid has a long waiting list in Alaska if you want to access care in your own home, and I'm going to need enough money to be able to wait through that waiting period before I can claim the benefits. Where will that money come from? That trust, because technically that trust never belonged to the spouse. It never has to be spent down to $2,000. Why wouldn't we want to do that? Here's another aspect why the safe harbor trust, I think, may be something people should look at. There's my grown-up version of my wife now, with some guy that's not me. After I am dead. Right? And this is such a cultural issue that we take a look at. In India, remember I said I grew up in a house with how many people? 16 of us. My grandmother died. My grandfather never lacked human companionship. In America, a spouse dies. You're not the type of a parent who's going to call up your children and say, hey, schmucko, I don't want these cards you send me. I need you in person. I still have a need for human companionship. The children will generally not know when is the right time for me to get involved, how much space do I need to give somebody, and we create this vacuum. And the most bizarre thing that I see walking into my office is husband and wife, they're just two lovebirds, 88 and 92. Oh, I want to take care of my wife. Okay, let's sit down and talk. What happened? Husband says, my wife had died 4 years ago. Wife is saying, oh, my husband and I got a divorce several years ago. So wife is okay. But I'm saying to the husband, if your deceased wife was sitting right here and she was watching you take care of Helen, would she have left her 50% to you? And if you are able to say, yeah, I don't mind, I mean, she can give it to Helen, then maybe we should do that. But for majority of the clients, I would say, I think the reality should be that when the person dies, they had a certain hope that you would use the money for you and our children. The Safe Harbor Trust does that without you ever needing to talk about a prenuptial agreement, because there's an ironclad guarantee. This money can never be used for anyone other than you and our children. End of story. Why wouldn't we want to look at something like that? Single people, spend your money down to $2,000. Why not put some of the money into a trust today? Problem with single people is, have you given away any assets in the last 5 years? When do we want that 5 years to start? Right. Today, when we don't need any of these benefits. 5 years before you're going to fall ill. That's when you want that to happen. So it doesn't matter. Single marriage, you can always use a Safe Harbor Trust, but this is a different way of looking at it. It's not that we don't know how to do it, but this is not what we do in traditional planning. So the reason why I teach at both University of Washington Seattle University is I just want to change the status quo. And so I started embarking on my PhD last year with the whole purpose of this is a paradigm shift of how we live and how we should live. This is a paradigm shift from the 1950s. Think about the movies, the Walton family, the Beverly Hillbillies. What are they talking about? The exact thing that the third world is living today. This is not such an alien concept, but it is deeply entrenched, and we, the consumers, can take take charge of our planning and come up with different results. That's your single person answer. I don't want to end up in a nursing home, don't want to become a burden to my kids. It's how your power of attorney is written, and we talked about that briefly. The average power of attorney is done with the hopes that now that I have the power of attorney, I will not be a burden, and my analysis is the average person's power of attorney is a written guarantee. The moment you fall ill, you are going to become a burden on whosever name you have put on that document. You have narrowed down the people who you're going to be a burden to, but you have done nothing to eliminate the burdens. Because a power of attorney must be chock full of directions. I fall ill, you must work with the care manager. When I fall ill, I can't manage my money. There are only 4 or 5 things that the average agent is going to be required to do. You're going to be asked to pay my bills, file my taxes, you'll have to manage my money. If the toilet breaks, you'll have to come fix that. And you have to be asking yourself, why would I want to keep doing my own taxes using TurboTax because it's so easy for me? Why don't I look at it through the lens of my children? If they have to step up to the plate, how easy will it be for them to do the TurboTax magic? And the average accountant, I would suspect, should be able to do a tax return for a few $100s. Why not have a power of attorney that says, the moment I fall ill, here's the accountant you're going to work with. Here's a financial planner I've been working with, you're going to go to this person. This is my bill pay system, whatever the system is, and I want you to follow that. The point is, I don't want you to have to become the person who's going to deal with all of these issues. My toilet breaks, here's a property manager's number, call this person, they will go ahead and find whoever they need to. That's the point of the money. You want your children to be there to make sure that people are not taking advantage of you or leaving you neglected. But I think none of us, almost none of us, are looking forward to the day that we fall ill and our kids have to become our caregivers or have to start taking time over from their work and their families to do things that we could easily have managed to do differently. That's powers of attorney. And then you take a look at several other documents, mental health advance directives. Rajiv hunched over the dining room table, writing a check for $25,000. Jamie peers over the shoulder. Honey, who are you writing this check to? Oh, the Nigerian king, who's our cousin. You didn't know that. Yeah, I've always known I was royalty. What is your legal answer for this? Go get a guardianship. Really, it's a mental health issue. Problem is, a healthcare power of attorney does not give the agent authority in majority of jurisdictions to get you mental health treatment. The only way you can get mental health treatment is either you submit voluntarily or a county mental health officer forces you into the mental health system, unless you have a mental health advance directive. Why would we not want to do something like that? So you have to go to your attorneys with your goals in mind and say, I want all this done. So what I'm describing to you is over the years, I've really come to appreciate the reality that retirement is not that difficult, but it's not nearly as simple. In retirement, we're going to need to deal with a lot of different disciplines. Usually it'll be about health, housing, finance, legal, and family. Those are 5 key pillars we have to work around. And if you really keep the thread in mind that usually the person's nightmares in retirement will start as a health issue, then they'll become a housing issue, they'll become a financial issue, they'll become a legal issue, and all along the way they're a financial issue. You have to know that they have to be all coordinated. Having a retirement plan setting up here, but not enough money, and I'm having to look at VA and Medicaid, is not a good way to do financial planning, because if I have to move money out of Bill's name, put it in Vivian's name, that's an IRA, and I have to pay $160,000 to the government, why am I doing any planning? You have to look at all of these things ahead of time. So the missing piece to me is what I call is this checklist. But if you reflect back for a second, everything that I've said to you, tell me there's something that is so strange or so bizarre, so out of this world that you haven't thought of before. You probably have thought about everything in everything that I talk about. But here's how that happens. You think about a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. It never comes together. And the first thing I think we need to be doing is to say retirement is multidisciplinary in nature. We're going to need to look at health, housing, finance, legal, family. We are not going to be able to afford to do everything, all the options that are in all of them. So we need to first take a look at what are my options in all of these areas and decide as to which options do I want to investigate, and then start thinking about how do I want to approach my plan. Once you have a checklist in mind, then you sit down and say, okay, well, which aspect do I want to work on first? Then you do only one thing at a time. When you do one thing at a time, then you start implementing that, health, housing, finance, legal. And the point I will tell you in my practice is, when a client comes to our office the first time, we'll spend about 2 hours talking about nothing but just general issues. Where are you in the process? I don't give recommendations in my first meetings. The first meetings, I just want to know where you are, where your weaknesses are. I'll tell you where they are. Then if you hire me, then I put everything in writing, send a letter out to you. You read that, come back to me in about 6 weeks. And together we work on the checklist. Once you have the checklist, we prioritize. Then we start implementing health, housing, finance, legal. And here's what I'm hoping for. Somewhere along this journey of you working on these processes, a light bulb will go through your head. And the ultimate light bulb that I want to go through my client's head, and I will not be the one saying that to you, it has to come from your heart, it has to come from your soul. When my child, my husband is standing in front of a nurse, and the nurse is saying, which rehab center do you want to take your spouse to? What answer do I want coming out of their mouth? The moment you get that answer, now you have the beginnings of a very effective plan, and then I want to drag your family into my office. It's not enough for you to hope, this is what my children will do. It's equally, if not more important, for your children to understand what your expectations are and how they are going to be doing it. Every now and then after the family meeting, we'll go back to the drawing board because it went up like a lead balloon, didn't go anywhere. And isn't it better we are here to change what we want to do today when we can make the changes, than make this assumption and then all of a sudden everything just falls apart. And the last thing you want to do is to make sure your children have that 800 number. They must have somebody they can call today. You cannot just leave it, go figure this out. Each one of these simple plans takes about 9 to 12 months to complete. It's a mini college course that you're going to be doing on a private basis with somebody who does this type of work. But once you're done with this, you should be able to walk away with a lot more confidence of knowing, I don't want to go to a nursing home, and I got a plan for that. I know what my financial limitations are. This is how I'm going to protect my assets. And this is how I've made sure that I will not become a burden to my children. And this is this 1.2 billion people question in India. Because if I was not born in India, and if I didn't bump into my wife and go through this thing, there's no way I would have come up with any of this stuff. It's a perspective issue. This is nothing different. It's just a perspective issue. So the question then becomes, well, what do you do now? Right? This is information. I think for most of us it makes sense, but where do I go from here? And the first thing is just a reminder. When you're doing planning, when you're looking at the rest of your life, you have to look at it as a collective. You will be dealing with health, housing, finance, and family issues. And what you need to figure out is how are you going to make sure that each one of these elements actually are working with each other. That's the missing piece in our planning today. It's not that we don't have good doctors or financial planners or accountants or insurance agents or lawyers. We have really good, well-meaning people. But the common thread between your doctor, your lawyer, your accountant is you. When was the last time your doctor, your lawyer, your accountant, they actually sat down around the table and said, this is what I'm doing for my client. What do you think is the missing thing? Yeah. You have to force it in that. You have to expect that. And I promise you, most good professionals will react to you because they want to do the right thing by you. They are limited by what they have. And this has to come from the consumers. If the consumers don't demand it, industry sure as heck does not have any financial incentive to actually react to the whole thing. So you have to take that. So what I suggest that we do is when we do the planning in my office, and then I'll give you some options as to what you should do. In my office, we offer 3 levels of planning. One is what I call is the comprehensive life planning, where a client will walk into my office and say, you know, everything that you're talking about, Rajiv, makes sense, and I want you to help me do it all. I don't have the time. I'm willing to spend the money. You get everything taken care of. What does that everything look like? First thing we are going to do is to do the checklist. When we look at the legal documents, I'll do every document. My law firm doesn't charge by the documents we prepare. It's the same price. You walk into my office and say, I've got a good power of attorney, I don't need yours. Great, you can save yours, you'll pay the same price. If I have to do 3 other documents that I have to do because I have to undo some of the old work you've done, it's the same price. It's not, you should never be paying for documents. You should be paying for a professional's mind. What am I not taking a look at? Then at some point in time, we'll do the family meeting. Then I'll hire a nurse to help you find a geriatric doctor. I will actually spend a lot of time helping you find the right insurance policy, because if you don't have the right insurance policy, you sure as heck don't have access to a geriatric doctor. So we'll hire somebody to do that. Then I'll hire a housing specialist, somebody who understands retirement communities, somebody who understands if you want to live at home. They have some access to realtors. They have access to people who can come and look at your house. Is it age friendly? What changes do you need to make? There's a whole group of people who do that work. I'll put you in touch with them. And then I'll send you to financial planners if you don't have one. And that's the first level we do, where I take responsibility to helping you coordinate everything. Quite frankly, I think this is an overkill for about 80% of the population. You don't need somebody else to tell you that. What you need is that checklist, a clear understanding, and the second option I give people, because I'm a lawyer, I'm a law firm. If I was a financial planner, I'd probably call that financial life planning, because I would be focused on my financial piece, and I'd be saying, let me educate you about the legal and the other ones, understand that, and hold other people accountable. But as a lawyer, I'm willing to say, okay, let's do the checklist, let's do all the legal documents, do the family meeting, but I'm going to leave everything in red to you, and you and I will work through this process, 6-9 months, and I will hold your hand, I'll walk you through it. If I have to pull your professionals together in my office, I will bring them together, and we will make sure that it's all coordinated. And the third option that we give is, let's not do any planning till we have a checklist. Just work on that's the missing piece in my mind in America, is how does this all come together? And the 3 ways we do checklists are, there's a workbook that we make available to whoever wants to. It just is basic guidelines as to, you know, this is how you should approach healthcare, this is what you should be looking at in housing, finance, and legal. And if you're willing to do it yourself, you can do that. The second one is where I really push my clients to work with me. Get the workbook, go home, read that, come back in 6 weeks, let's see you and I work together, because it's not that easy. I have a lot more, 17 years of experience should give me some edge. And come down and we can do it together. And the third option is the custom option, which is on the left-hand side, which is where we take responsibility to do it all. It's not a workbook I give you, I write a personal book for you, if you will. It's a 60, 70-page letter that I write for people. But I'm eliminating things that you should not read, and just giving you things you should read. So those are the 3 options that I kind of give people to work with. So then the question becomes, well, what do you do with this information? This is the ultimate question that comes to. And my answer is, I'm not licensed in Alaska. I don't practice law in Alaska. But you have elder law attorneys who do practice this stuff here. Start by going to this website, agingoptions.com. This is chock full of information. For years, I've been just collecting information. And every week for my radio show, I'm doing prep work, and I put a lot of links and stuff like that up there, and you can even get that. You can call me in the office. For a lot of my out-of-state clients, what we will do is just that checklist. And then my job becomes is to hold your hand and say, go to this person, this person, this person, and then once you have your local people, you can go ahead and work with. But ultimately, the main thing you need to focus on if you're looking at retirement, assess where your gaps are. Don't assume that the professionals have everything covered. They've covered from their angle, but there are little pieces missing because we are not working with each other. Your financial planner, your lawyer, your accountant, they should all be working with each other. We really should be understanding what are the things I'm trying to do and what work is going to get in the way if you do it the wrong way. And learn about a life plan, how it can help you and your family. So, I'm just about at the end of my time. I certainly want to go ahead and thank you for bringing me to this land where nobody ages. But turns out that we do, and I hope you found some information. Thanks so much for letting me come here. Thank you so much.
This program was presented by the KTOO Legacy Foundation and the Southeast Alaska Estate Planning Council. For more information, visit www.ktoo.org/legacy.